Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're actually going to start setting up our scene and getting it to look like a game. So what we need to do to start is make sure that we get our project set up. Because of the constraints of the recording system that I've got going, I'm going to use the web default 600 by 450 so it will fit nicely on the screen. And the very first thing I want to do with our scene is set up the camera. Now, to set up the camera, mostly we're not doing anything 3D, so I don't really need a skybox, so I'm going to set it to a solid color, and I'm going to change the background to black. That just gets rid of the any additional overhead that might have been incurred with trying to draw a skybox, and black is always a good color. Now, because this is a 2D game and not a 3D game, there's a couple of other things that we want to do. The first is we want to change this into an orthographic camera. Because it's 2D, we don't really need to worry about having perspective drawn, and we want everything to actually not have perspective. Now, from there, we want to set our orthographic size. This is just basically how many units is our camera and our scene. We don't need a very large scene because it's just a small demo, so we're going to go with 5. Now, if you look, this box represents the camera's rendering area. So the camera will show everything that's inside this box. Well, again, this is just a 2D game and it represents as a flat surface. So we definitely don't need 1,000 units of depth. So I'm going to drop that down to about 20, which gives us a nice, nice area. And our near clip plane, we're not going to have anything right on top of the camera, so we also don't need, a 0.3. So we can go with something as far away as 1. So that's what we'll work with. It'll just give us a nice little viewing area, nice little rectangle cube to work with. Now we've got our camera set up, and I'm going to save here just in case something happens and Unity crashes. I don't lose any of these settings. The very first thing I want to do is get some of our scene together. Now to do that, I'm just going to start with a very, very simple cube. I'm going to bring my cube in, and as you can see, here's our cube, and he's gray. Now, you may wonder why he's gray. If you're not familiar with Unity, that might seem a bit odd. The reason he's gray is because actually there are no lights in the scene, and we're going to take care of that in a sec as well. But after creating the cube, the very first thing I want to do is zero out his position. So this is going to put him at the very center of the world. And if you look, our camera is set at 1 unit high. I'm going to also put him at the center of the world. So now our cube is at the very middle of our world and in the very middle of our camera. Now let's get some scaling on him. So we're going to scale him out this way some. So let's go with 15 here. His height I'm going to change down to 0.25. And his depth I'm going to change to 5. Because this is 2D, you're not going to see his depth, but because the way our scene is going to be set up for our sprites, the collision is going to be based on a sphere collider, so I actually want to have some depth to this floor plane so the collisions will happen correctly. The next thing I want to do is lower this floor some, and I want to rotate it just a bit so it has some slant to it, just like that. Maybe move them up just a little bit more. Alright, now one of the things that I talked about earlier when creating this was he was gray. Now the reason he's gray, well, he looks gray here, but that's not exactly why. His true color by default is white, but he's gray because there is no camera in the scene. or sorry, correction, there's no light in the scene, not that there's no camera. So one way that we can fix it is by adding a light. We could add a directional light like this, and then he lights up and you can see his true color, which is white. Now, in a regular game on a PC, using a couple of lights is not going to be that much of a big deal. But when you're working on a very tight budget, resource-wise, in let's say an iPhone game, you don't want to use lights if they're not absolutely needed. If you can find a better way to get around without having to use lights, then by all means, that is the way you should do it to save on resource. So we're going to delete that, and I'm going to show you how to achieve the same effect without using a single light in the scene. To do it, we're going to come up here to Materials, and we're going to create a new material, and I'm going to name this floor material, or floor mat. Now, again, the color is white, but let's apply it to our cube. And while I'm at it, I'm going to rename our cube floor. But as you can see, it now has the floor material applied to it, but it's still the same grade. Nothing's changed. That's because by default, the material that is assigned to an object, unless it's assigned another material, is a diffuse white, which expects a light to light it up. We don't have a light, so what you see is just a middle gray. To fix this, all you have to do is come into the shader and select Particle Shader and Alpha Blended. Now the Alpha Blended Particle Shader does not require a light, so you see its full luminosity without having a light. If you want to change the color, you come up here to Tint Color, pick from the color swatch, and that gets us our color. So with a very simple shader selection and applying a material and setting a color, we've achieved the effect as if we actually had a light in the scene. It's a real simple trick. It's very, very efficient, and something that I highly recommend using instead of using lights. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and add a couple more of these floors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do Control-C, Control-V to make a copy. I'm going to move it up. And in this case, I want to move this one over to about halfway. Maybe slide it up a little bit. And then I'm going to select the bottom floor again. I'm going to hit Control-C, Control-V. I'm going to move it up a little bit. And I'm going to inverse its Z rotation, so it is actually facing the other way. And then I'm going to move it to about here. And this is just mostly just guesswork. Doesn't have to be exactly precise, but it's just something that looks nice. Now from here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create another cube, and I'm going to name this cube wall, and I'm going to apply our floor material to it, and I'm going to set its Z to say 0.5, its Y to 15, and its depth to 5. And then I'm going to position it so it butts up right against that wall. Then I'm Control-C, Control-V, and I'm going to move it over. And something I missed is I forgot to zero out its, in this case I want to zero out its Y and its Z, because I've already moved it on its x-axis. I don't want to mess with that, otherwise I'll have to reposition it. So I'm just going to zero out the X and Y. Now if I come over here, rotate around, everything should be aligned and all up against the 0 of the world origin on depth. Now, in the very intro video, I mentioned that draw calls in iPhone development is everything. And with this, if we're to run it, let me save it, and if I were to run it and bring up our stats, you can see that there's 5 draw calls. And I had mentioned in the first video that there's a way that we could reduce this down even further without relying on the iPhone's static batching or dynamic batching. It's a little bit more advanced. I'm not going to actually show you how to do it. I'm just going to tell you a way you could do it. You could actually take this, bring it into a 3D modeling software package like 3D Max, Maya, Softimage, Blender, some of the many others. You can model this all out as a single object. And then if you model that out as a single object and export it as an FBX and bring it as an FBX into Unity, you'll get the same effect. It'll only be one mesh, and after you bring it in as a single mesh, it will only be one draw call. So, and let's see. Well, it's a good thing I saved because Unity seemed to have crashed. So, like I said, it's good to save all the time. And here at 3DBuzz, one of our guiding principles is to show you everything. So even if something crashes, we want to go ahead and show that process and how we recover from it. So I'm going to close out, and hopefully, there we go, close the program, open Unity back up. And file. And because I said before I ran it, I did not lose anything, which is a good thing. So basically, that's all I wanted to show you in this video was how to set up the camera, how to set up the level, and if you're on a tight budget and working with an iPhone, recommend that you design your levels in a 3D modeling program and export them from there and bring them in as a single mesh, so you only take a single draw call hit on it. And with that, that'll be the end of this video, and I will see you next time.